Okay, so in our conversation, we've talked about the society, the culture, and the environment. Then so now, like I said, people are now conscious. However, the society still contribute to why people would commit suicide, like you mentioned, right, the schedule days and the likes, and nobody's trying to give in a listening there. So how can we change the narratives now with the society, helping survivors or
Mhm.
helping people to survive or helping people to go through that process, in terms of scaling through that challenge
Mhm.
of being abused, is that sexually, is it emotionally, is it physically?
Okay. So, for me, I think it starts with, letting people freely speak their truth. Um, if someone says, I was sexually abused, the first questions shouldn't even be, what were you wearing, and all those things that we usually respond with, but an acknowledgement of what had happened to them. Um, I remember sharing, very recently with my pastor at the church I attend in Canada about, what had happened and some things that I was, dealing with, and as a result, I shared, the entire story of what had happened to me. And one of the things he said was, "I'm so sorry that this happened to you." And it's not my first time trying to, in a spiritual setting or in a church setting, trying to talk to someone about something like that, even things like depression. And oftentimes what you will see is, when you share, they start treating you differently. They start taking responsibilities from you. They start segregating you and stigmatizing you and labeling you. But when I shared with him, one of the things he said was, "I'm sorry this happened. I know the fact that you've survived this long, but is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything I can do to help you?" And for me, that goes a long way. Those are the kind of questions we should be asking. In case of a child, remove children from the place of abuse and then investigate. The least you owe them, even if they said it happened 20 years ago and now they are 50 years old, the least you can do is try and investigate and get to the bottom of things. So one of the ways really will change the narrative, it's going to be a number of things working together, and some of it are going to work in a cycle, relationship. But it's and in no particular order, it's letting people, creating safe space for people to, come out and say this happened, and not stigmatizing them and labeling them. That's one. Two is that, with especially with for children, is create boundaries around your children's lives. Not everybody needs to have access to your children, if that makes sense. Protect them and teach them. And one of the ways you protect them is you teach them what is right behavior and what is not right. You know, for most kids, when it's happening, something in your mind is saying this is wrong, but you really don't know. And then some perpetrators are able to convince the child that this is normal, by the way, and the child goes on thinking it is normal, and then they get deeper and deeper. But somewhere in your mind, instinctively, you feel it's wrong. So educate your children at that young age. As they are growing older, the education begins to deepen into, what they can handle age appropriately. For if it's something that's happened to someone in an adult age, is that your show compassion. We all owe it to ourselves to learn. If you don't understand how, and this is maybe like things like mental health and suicide and depression, if you don't understand how those things play out, the things that lead to them, how it occurs for people, how to cope, then educate yourself on it rather than just, make careless comments. So we all owe it to ourselves to individually educate and collectively educate. And then, that piece of showing that compassion. Someone has been through something, be empathetic, be empathetic about it, and all of that. And then let's take power from the perpetrators. The questions we send the way of the survivors. If we're questioning the perpetrators instead, a lot of them will be cautioned. A lot of them will be cautioned. If you're, if for instance you know, I think I don't know if you heard about the story of there was a Nigerian in the UK who texted a teenager about, wanting to hang out with her, wanting to be in a relationship with her, something of that sort. And her father reported him. I think the guy was deported eventually back to Nigeria. Now, somebody like that, if I had that experience alone, I can tell you that there are some Nigerian men who maybe are in the UK and they want to do that, and they've seen that guy and what that did to him and his family. That alone will provide caution for some people to say, don't even think about it.
Okay, I hear you said in the UK, but we're seeing that in a country like ours, which is Nigeria, the law is there, the enforcement agencies are there, but then it's a case of I'm rich, so I have a connection maybe with a person in authority. I can use that to scale through. So how do you think people in the authority should also be of help? Because the laws are there. Nigeria have a very good and fantastic law, but the implementation of those laws
And the enforcement. Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? Because sometimes unfortunately, when the law itself is not working, there are other ways around it, right? So, and where I was even given that example is that in a case like Nigeria, for instance, where we know that the law may not do anything for that girl, right? At the very least, there's name shaming that has happened. There's name shaming that has happened, right? And like the Abuja guy, for instance, the reason he kept doing that. Imagine if somebody had arrested him once. I mean, Nigeria is money, right? Arrested him once and done something. Actually, I'll give you even a very good example of one that happened. A friend of mine and I one time were living alone, in a place, and some guys got some very brilliant idea, and they came to the house with the intention of raping both of us in the house. I went to work. I came back. The whole house the door was wide open, so I knew something had happened. So I was going in with caution. And when I got upstairs to the room, I could tell that there was a struggle that had happened here. Things were all over the place. I saw the girls' clothes, they were torn and somewhere on the corner. My heart was, I was like, what happened? So what had happened was, ideally I was supposed to have been back from work, but I chose to walk some distance that day, and that was my saving grace. So these guys knew we were home. They traced us to the house. They came to the house, and then with intention of raping us, whatever, God knows what else. She said they had a knife. One of them had a knife. One of them had a gun. And they were saying that when they were done, they were going to kill her. And they were asking, where's your other friend? God so kind, it's a story building. She figured, either ways, I'm dead. So she took a leap of faith and jumped from the story building down. Thankfully, she's alive. Very alive today. And as God will have it, all she had was just a very small scratch on her leg. Now, when I came back and I heard, having been through all that I'd been through, and at this point, I had, to some extent, found my voice back in "you can't bully me," right? I had not still fully addressed my personal sexual violence issues, but when it comes to other areas, you can't bully me. And I called the police. We got the guy, got some of his friends, and then we took them to the station for questioning and all that and whatnot. The parents apparently were pastors of, a very renowned church. I'm just going to keep that private. Very renowned church. And then they came, and they were well-known and they're wealthy, of course, compared to two young single girls. And they came, and next thing we knew, they had paid the police people, and the police was going to release them. And these are guys that had said that we even had the effrontery. While they were in cell, they were threatening us and saying, if they come out of this place, we might as well consider ourselves dead people. Ha! And they're about to release them in a question of hours. I don't have the money. Neither did she. Thankfully, right, we, called one or two friends who some other people got offended about it and helped us escalate. And luckily, the person I was working for at the time, the uncle was the area commander of that whole area where that police station was. That was our saving grace. So the man heard and said, if you release those guys, if what they did is true and you have not even, and you release them, you have me to respond to. That was our saving grace. Now, even that is not right. When you think about it, that shouldn't be how it should be. That was our saving. And they had those boys in and they were trying to question and get to the bottom of things. Even found out later that, they had gone and robbed somewhere. So they even reprimanded them for all of that together at the end of the day. Now, these boys' parents came, and when they saw that, power has now passed power. I remember the mother trying to tell me, she now started changing the narrative and started preaching at me to say, I have an unforgiving spirit, I should just let it go. And I said, I have an unforgiving spirit? Now, what that did for those boys, I think eventually, I don't know, maybe they released them eventually. What that did for them was they couldn't even stay in that neighborhood anymore. Right? Wherever they went, I don't know. I don't know how they eventually even ended up. But let's even assume that they actually somehow returned to that neighborhood. At the very least, there's some name shaming that now people know who you are. And they can caution their children, people around them accordingly and say, this person, stay away. So that in itself, it's not a perfect system, but it'll help with some level of deterrence. So I know that we have a lot to do in that implementation process when it comes to authorities and all that. Because if we want to wait for the government to fully do it, in fact, some of the perpetrators are people in authority and power, which in itself is on the continuum of sexual violence. It's sexual harassment. In my book, you'll hear about, a lecturer experience, not just one lecturer experience, and, cases of lecturers threatening your grades if you don't sleep with them.
You just mentioned about your book. Okay, we'll come back to that because I hear you talking a lot about books, but then not let me into it. However, I just want to ask questions about, okay, so let's say someone who happens to have been abused, will now approach you or as a survivor to say, okay, I am abused, then I need to get through this. So what are the practical steps that you would give to such a person, and would you be willing to say, okay, if you have any abuse at all, they can reach out to you? Can people reach out to you?
So I'll say yes, they can, of course. But not because I'm a therapist. I'm not. And not because, I don't have a psychology background either. What I have is my own experience and the things that I've done that have helped me. And I mentioned that I've never even had like a professional, therapeutic sessions as it were. But really, it starts with, what I said I did in that room that day, which is come to a point of, I was abused, it happened. That's one. And then two, one thing I learned is that people who have been abused tend to have a lot of self-guilt and self-doubt because somewhere in their minds, they keep convincing themselves that it was their fault. And if there's one thing that I maybe even want to tell people is, it wasn't your fault, right? Stop blaming yourself for somebody else's errors. It wasn't your fault. So get to that point where you self-forgive yourself, even in cases where you think that you made a stupid move, as it were. Like I felt, with the 11-year-old case, I made a stupid move. Why did I go there? For those moments, tell yourself, I'm sorry that, I didn't think this through at that time, and forgive yourself. And when you're forgiving yourself, this part might sound very counterintuitive to everything that and when I tell people they can't believe this part, but really the third piece is you have to forgive your offender. Because the truth is, you really would not be able to move forward until you even forgive them too. If you refuse to forgive them, you keep holding on to that bitterness, and it only stresses our bodies, really. It doesn't help you. Negative emotions stress our body, and people may or may not know this, right? But negative emotions stress our body. Even when you're not consciously aware of them, the fact that they are there, it stresses your body. So forgive yourself, accept that it happened, Forgive yourself wherever you feel like I made some erroneous moves that maybe if I had done XYZ differently, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Sometimes there might be those cases. Forgive yourself for those moments. Forgive the offender. Now, if you have an opportunity to speak, speak up, speak up. When I look back, I wish that even at that 7-year old, I took my chances. It's better that I speak up, and because I mean, the people that I watched get beat for speaking up, that's them and their families and the people they opened up to. I may have spoken up at that age, at that time, and that may not be my own experience. Who knows, right? But I mean, I let that get to me. Is that take your chances and speak up. If you now speak up and they don't do anything, then I remember one time someone reached out to me and she was talking about how, I hate my mom because I feel like she should have known that this happened to me and she didn't. And now, I was abused by our neighbor and all of that and da da da. And she said, and I want to talk to her and I want to have that conversation with her. And I said, your mom might actually not even be aware. You think she was aware, but she might not be. And I said, I have the conversation with her. And she said, but I'm afraid, what if she doesn't accept it? I said, then part of the acceptance is that I can choose to share my story and people will not accept it. Accept that fact too. For me, when one of my mentors asked me a question and said, are you sure the first book you write in your life, you want it to be about this? What if people push back and they don't believe you? And I said, it won't be the first time they won't believe me. But for the person who this needs to help, it will help them. And I'm now at peace with the fact that even when people have all the evidences, there are people who still try to blame you and pin it on you. And I've accepted that. So accept it. Accept how people react. What happens to you and what you do is a reflection of who you are. How people choose to react is just a reflection of who they are. So, and then seek help. Now, help might be professional. For me, even though I didn't have those professional settings, like I said, I have people who, maybe by profession or whatever, they're counselors or people that I can talk to. And when you're seeking the help, you're also building support systems for yourself. My husband, for instance, knows everything about my experience, my story, how it impacted me. There were moments where he saw me struggle with my mental health. There were times where he was aware of some of the societal experiences that I had and all of those things, right? And he's one of my greatest supporters, my greatest supporter, after God, right? So, you need people like that around you. There are some people who don't know my full story, but they know that, something happened and I know they're there to support me. So get good support systems. And then, where need be and you're still struggling, I still recommend getting that professional help, because these people are trained to be able to do that. I always talk about the fact that maybe at some point I might still talk to a therapist. I'm at a point in my life where it feels like I don't think I need that. But I'm also a Christian, I believe in God. And I've seen that really play its part in my healing journey. And I took good advantage of that as well. So if anybody is open to faith, as it were, I honestly encourage that. I'm not saying plain church. That's different. A personal relationship with God where you can relate with God and let Him help you heal. Help you forgive the people that have offended you and even people who they didn't abuse you but they refuse to believe you. So that's some of the things that for me, those are the things that helped me. And I think that if people, and give yourself time to heal, honestly, because these things took time. It might take, sometimes you think, okay, I'm past this. Something happens, you might have a trigger, something happens, and you find yourself feeling scared or you find yourself feeling distrustful of someone, and you want to feel bad or you're like, why haven't I gotten over this? Give yourself the time you need to heal. So, lastly is help others where you can. Because for me, I think that when I started being comfortable talking about the experience and started sharing about it, and as I hear people say, wow, I thought I was alone in this, it has its own way of empowering me to want to speak more. And the more I'm even talking about it, sometimes in that moment when I'm sharing, I go into reflections and something just jumps at me as to, oh, you can, I could have done this then. And I can share that experience with someone else, and that helps them too. So, wholeness in itself, it comes from when we are helping other people too, right? So, however you've gone in your journey, make sure that you're pulling someone else out with you along the path, because it also helps you to want to get better, if nothing else, for their benefits.